we go into Thank you very much. No mai haere mai. Welcome back. Another topic related to the same issue, and I'll just go straight to you, Margot. Thank you.
To echo our chair's words, hello again, welcome back. So look, again, I won't take too long because I think this is, well, potentially is going to be quite an interesting topic for us to delve into. And I think given our lead-in briefings and conversations we've had, I think the governance arrangements are quite important to you, and I think you will have a high interest in them. So, again, you've met Dougal. So sitting to my right here is Dougal, and we also have Chris O'Brien from Minter Allison Rudd Watts, and also from Minters is Dan there. So Dan may pop up to the lectern from time to time. So I'm really going to just hand over to Dougal now. I think what we'll do is go straight into Dougal. He'll take you through the agenda. You may have seen, if you've looked at the presentation circulated, that there is an org chart provided there that will come up on screen, but we'll skip through it quite quickly. The only intent of including that was to refresh your memory of the governance structure as we go through establishment. So happy to take questions on that particular slide if you want, but we won't step you through it. And without too much more ado, I'm going to hand over to Dougal.
Thank you, Margot. Thank you, Chair. Kia ora koutou, councillors. We have less slides from than in the session this morning, but we appreciate there's probably just as much discussion. So we've got a number of points for patai and discussion throughout this pack as well. Margot's just making the point to work. But just as a kind of an overview of the session and what we intend to cover today, firstly, the legislative context and the foundation documents that are required within that legislative context, a brief introduction to those foundation documents, and then we'll talk you through the drafting process both to date and the feedback that we've had to inform that, how that's informed critical success factors for the drafting, and then talk you through what we recommend in terms of share allocation, voting and reserved matters, and the other key matters that need to be addressed in the foundation documents as well.
Okay.
So firstly, just in terms of the legislative context of the reforms, Pointer raises that there is significant new legislative change coming in which Metro Water will need to operate. So you'll be aware there's Commerce Commission, taumata arawai, the role of the Regional Council in terms of regulation, but also other regulation that will guide the water entity. And in addition to that, we've obviously got new legislation relating to water. So we've got the Preliminary Arrangements Act, which is particularly in relation to the Water Services Delivery Plan, which we talked about this morning. But we've also got the Enduring Arrangements for Water, which are being worked through the House at the moment. Through Bill 3, and that really sets out the enduring purpose and objectives of a new water organisation and what it has to do, and also all the important provisions for things like developing and setting a statement of expectations and developing and setting a water services strategy. So within the context of that legislative framework, in order to get clarity between the partners and the shareholders and Metro Water directors about the intent and direction of the organisation, we've identified 4 key documents which we need to get on with. These aren't the only documents that will be required for the establishment of the organisation, but these are really the key documents that we all need to try and get as much agreement on up front, so that as directors come on board, as partners move forward post-elections, we're all singing from the same song sheet or paddling the same waka in the same direction. So those 4 key documents are firstly the Constitution. The Constitution's a relatively vanilla document, but it effectively sets the rules for Metro Water, including the rights and responsibilities of the shareholders and directors, any limitations or restrictions to be applied to Metro Water. More importantly and more interestingly probably for yourselves is the partners agreement. So this is the joint agreement between the 5 councils and Mana Whenua partners about how you're going to work together. So how you will manage and govern the relationship between the partners and Metro Water. So there's clarity for you as partners, there's clarity for Metro Water as directors, as an organisation. And that's really the relationship between the key partners. From that partners agreement, as we talked about this morning, really flows the statement of expectations. Again, a really important document for the partners to say, here's what we expect from Metro Water, here are the key outcomes that we expect you to give effect to, here's the direction of travel that we expect. So this is a joint document issued jointly by the partners to Metro Water, and will really inform and guide Metro Water's decisions as it develops the water services strategy in response to that. And really importantly, Metro Water must give effect to the statement of expectations. Lastly, not a statutory requirement, but very loudly and clearly we've heard from elected members the importance of having a customer charter. So one of the key documents that we're working to develop principles for is a customer charter, set by the partners, embedded through the statement of expectations, and then developed as a document by Metro Water so that it can own it and own that relationship with its customers going forward. So those are the 4 key documents. They have an interlink and interrelationship with each other, so they work as a set of documents together. Some of these documents are for the partners and shareholders to own, such as the Constitution and Statement of Expectations, whereas other documents, such as the Water Services Strategy, are documents for Metro Water to develop and produce in response to that. Sorry, we're having some technical errors here, which we'll come to. But hopefully you can follow along as I go through. Do you want me to pause, Margo, or carry on? Okay. We'll pause for 2 minutes.
Yeah, we're just taking a little break. It smells delicious, Ray. Sorry, I don't know if you don't feel the same way. Thanks, team.
Thanks, Margo. So these are the 4 foundation documents that we've talked to, the Constitution, Partners Agreement, which we've previously used the term Stakeholders Agreement, but more appropriately reflects the partnership approach, the Statement of Expectations, and the Consumer Charter. So as I mentioned, these work together as a framework, some being partners and stakeholders documents, as opposed to some being Metro Water's documents to develop in response to those. In terms of drafting these, we've been working through a process to ensure that we're responding to feedback and direction from the partners and engagement, and that's really informed the principles that underpin the terms of the foundation documents. Today we're particularly here to talk to you about the term sheets, or the key terms that would go into these foundation documents, and following feedback and direction from councils, those will then be developed into the full documents. It means that what we produce and put before you today is more in the order kind of 40, 50 pages of documents rather than giving you 100 pages of documents. But what we've tried to do is really to pull out the key issues. So I understand what's been circulated to you in addition to the slide pack is that you'll also have a summary overview of the documents produced by Chris and his team, as well as the more detailed term sheets which set out the key matters as well. So what we've tried to do with this pack is to distill those key issues for you and really highlight those key matters, just to help you to navigate through all that information that you have in front of you. So the overview document, sorry, is that one that looks like this. So similar information in this as to what we're talking through today, with the more detailed terms all set out in the longer documents as well. In terms of this process, we've obviously, like we discussed this morning, had quite a lot of input on the journey so far with councils over the last 12 months or so, and that's helped to inform the starting point. You'll recall back in May we had initial briefings with elected members in relation to the foundation documents, and that was really useful for getting a range of feedback, such as the need for a consumer charter. Further to that, the councils then made decisions between late May and June on delivery model options, and yourselves, like a number of other councils, made resolutions which informed the principles of the key terms as well. So that information's been fed in as well. So we've used that to develop the key terms and to test those with officers and chief executives in order that we can bring today an initial set of key terms for your feedback. So we're partway through the process based on your feedback today, based on discussions with the AOG over the next few meetings, and also based on council decisions between 19 and 21 August. We intend to get to a position where we have a draft set of documents which clarify as far as possible an agreed position between the partners. And we recognise that incoming councillors post-elections will need a role in terms of ratification of these documents as well. So just really wanted to stress there's been a useful lot of input to date. We're really interested in the input through this period of the process, and there will be further opportunities for elected member input through the decisions you make in August and post-elections as well. So we're kind of working through that overall process. In terms of some of that key feedback, I just want to highlight we've tried to clarify, tried to group areas of feedback. So the feedback's come from elected members and councils, it's come from engagement with mana whenua partners, it's come from engagement with officers. So we've had feedback across these range of themes from customer, community, mana whenua, environmental, establishment of the organisation and governance and decision making. These have been really useful areas of feedback to help guide and inform the principles. Just to call out a few kind of key points here: the customer charter and the need to provide clear and fair service and maintain social licence, build local capacity, that water is a public good, partnership with councils and mana whenua, recognising and upholding te tiriti, treating water as being kaitiaki for te taio, that real clear expectation on stormwater, including collaboration with councils in terms of achieving the overall outcomes, that we enable the future exit of Greater Wellington as a potential to happen, and we recognise that councils may be looking at amalgamation in the future as well, so we need some form of a review point. And then in terms of governance and decision making, really that need for accountability and transparency, the prohibition on distributions and dividends, so being a key point, the operational independence of the organisation with strong oversight from shareholders and partners. And also, as mentioned at this council, still wanting that direct relationship between councils and the board of the new organisation. So hopefully some of the feedback that you've provided us to date you can see reflected there. This is a summary of that feedback, which I say has underpinned what we're recommending as a set of principles. I should pause there for any patai.
Councillor Winera.
Kia ora. Hey, just on the customer or consumer charter, I've heard both terms. Is there some risk of Metro Water effectively being the owner of that document? Is there a case of perhaps the policeman policing himself?
Metro Water needs to be the owner of that document, in that it'll have the relationship with the customer. It needs to be accountable for the relationship with the customer. I think what's really important is the councils have signalled this is very important, and through your statement of expectations you can set out what you expect to be in that customer charter. Metro Water can then flesh that out and develop that and build those relationships with customers building on that, but it's an important part of being accountable. In terms of the policemen policing themselves, this is partly the role of the Commerce Commission as well. The Commerce Commission's role is price quality, so part of the role is not only, are you receiving fair and value for money service, but are you receiving good service as well? So that's part of it as well.
Cheers. And just a follow-up question on the charter. Was there really no ability for that charter to be agreed prior to the standing up of Metro Water by all the constituent councils?
It is a commitment made by Metro Water and therefore by its directors, and it's appropriate that directors have some input and understanding about what it is they're signing up to.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Brown?
Thanks. I'm just looking at the establishment organisation structure and the two blue boxes on the top left, councils as shareholders and Mana Whenua. In terms of their relationship with the Partners Committee, is there any difference? I mean, at the moment there's a sort of a range of different powers and responsibilities, if you like, between the two different groups. So I was just wondering if there was any different between the two groups now.
There are still some. Sure. Sorry, there are some differences. We've tried to minimise them for a number of reasons, but there are some things under the Companies Act that only shareholders can approve.
Can you give me an example?
We'll come on to that.
We are going to list those, but things like amalgamations, major transactions, things of that sort of ilk can only be actually voted on by the shareholders.
Councillor, as we step through the briefing today, we'll take you into each of the documents, and so we'll cover that off. If you know where to find me if we don't get into that level of detail. Yeah.
Shall I carry on, Chair? So this feedback has underpinned a set of critical success factors which we tested with the AOG at the last meeting, but again, I won't read all these out, but some of the key matters, again, hopefully are reflective of the feedback and direction that you've given us. A skills-based competent board being at the heart of the governance of the organisation, which helps to achieve that balance between strong corporate governance and the board and management level operational independence. Having that strong relationship with Mana Whenua partners, building trust and confidence of stakeholders and customers, providing high quality service and value for money with customers. So I won't list all these out again, they're there in front of you, but these are some of the critical success factors which again have really underpinned the key terms of these documents. Moving now in part to Councillor Brown's question. So as a group of shareholders and as a group of partners, you'll need ways of making decisions. So what we're proposing is that there is one set of documents which both partners, including Mana Whenua councils and shareholders, being the councils, sign up to. As financial shareholders, and only councils are legally able to be financial shareholders, there are some matters governed primarily by the Companies Act that you will need to make decisions on. What we're proposing is that decisions that can only be made by the shareholders are made on a basis of your shareholding rights, and we've got a slide talking about how the shares could be allocated. So this would apply to particularly the shareholder reserved matters. As Chris said, these are primarily matters which are governed by companies law, and they're quite significant matters which don't come up that often, but are important that the financial shareholders have got a way of making decisions on. So such matters as buyback of shares, any call on additional capital contribution, taking steps in relation to amalgamation or wind up a dissolution of Metro Water, any other kind of major transactions for Metro Water. So these are the type of matters which only financial shareholders can make decisions on. But as I say, this is primarily aligned with companies law, and these are decisions that we therefore are recommending are made on a basis of shareholding allocation between the financial shareholders, i.e. the councils. Chris, anything to add to that?
No. No.
So in distinct from that, you'll also be working as a group of partners. So this is the 5 councils and the 2 Mana Whenua partners sitting around the table as a group of partners. The partners collectively also need to be able to make decisions, and it's recommended that these decisions are made through a partners committee. So these partners committee would be able to make decisions on a range of reserved matters, and what we're recommending is that those are made on a unanimous basis, but where that consensus is not possible, each member gets a single vote, and it would be recommended that an approval threshold of 75%. So one party, one vote, with decisions where possible made by unanimous decision, but at times there may not be a possibility of getting unanimous decision, and therefore you'd have a threshold of 75%. So some of the key terms that we're proposing here would be covered by the Partners Committee are such things as amendments to the Partners Agreement or the Constitution, issuing of the Statement of Expectations, the selection of appointment of directors, the adoption of a skills matrix for the Board of Directors, and input into the water services strategy. I'll just finish off on share allocation and then perhaps take questions on this. In terms of share allocation, so this particularly relates to decisions made by partners, the shareholders of the organisation. Again, we need a method of allocating shares between the partners as they enter the company. There are a range of ways of doing this by allocating shares on such ways of connections or population or revenue. What we're recommending is that the share allocation is based on the asset value less the starting debt. So the net book value of your assets minus the debt that you transfer into the new organisation. This could be completed in two phases: an initial allocation, which is based on best current information, and then a wrap-up allocation once we have final reconciliation of the debt that's transferred to the new organisation, which we'll only know at the end of the year, and a consistent basis of valuation across the assets by the partners. So for Wellington City, under this model, under this recommended model, it would mean that Wellington City has around about 45% of the shareholding allocation. This will probably move by a percentage point or two as we work through a final reconciliation, but it is indicative of the share allocation. As you see from those other models of share allocation, they're broadly similar to this as well. So under those different models, Wellington City would also have a similar shareholding. Pause there for questions, because I know there were some questions on this.
Yes, Councillor McNulty.
Got a few here. Just a really quick one. So 8 partners, is that right?
7.
5 plus 2 iwi, not 3 iwi. Okay, so 75. Okay, let me rework the maths. I'm just trying to understand 75%. How many?
75% or more. It's pretty hard to get to 3/4 of a.
100 divided by 28. Okay, so you would need 6 out of 7 to make a decision if there wasn't unanimity.
Correct.
Okay, that's better. So WCC will have the same rights to approve or reject directors at a 47% revenue share as Porirua at 5% or Upper Hutt at 10%. That's correct?
Yes.
How is that different to Wellington Water?
So as partners, you'll need a way of making decisions. What we're recommending is, as partners, you sit around the table and, as far as possible, try and make decisions on a unanimous basis. And what we're recommending here is each council gets a voice, as does Mana Whenua Partners. If there are alternative options for that, we would welcome your feedback. But I think some of the things that you need to take into consideration would be how would you allocate decision-making rights to Mana Whenua Partners if that is different basis than one voice and one vote per partner.
So
Again, as far as possible, decisions made by a unanimous decision rather than going to a vote. The best interests of the partners is to try and agree and find consensus on these decisions rather than find differences. So I think it's really important to try and find a model which encourages unanimous decisions rather than forcing things to a vote.
Last one. I mean, I appreciate that, but again, Wellington Water's governance has failed. That's why we're here, and it's a very similar structure. So if this council is of the view that they vehemently oppose that equal footing, where 47% is the same at 5%, what can we do? It's one more for you, Pro Margo.
Stepping up out of the detail, and I appreciate for some this will probably be a rose-tinted view, but it is a view I think we do need to give some consideration to. We all know the Wellington Water model hasn't been a success. And I think we need to be looking at this opportunity that the Local Water Done Well reform is providing to reset. For the good of our city and our region, we need to find a way to work together with our partners. And if that means we need to think differently about voting and decision making, then I would encourage us to think about that. I don't think there would be any benefit in exploring voting rights different to what we're talking about here based on the amount of revenue or the amount of debt. I think we do need to think about a partnership model. As Dougal said, if there are other ways of considering it, really happy to have that feedback. I'm just going to pause there because I know our CFO wants to say something.
Can I just add something in here, because I think this is a really important thing that you need to have in your minds around the concept of control from an accounting perspective. And so if the rules around control from an accounting perspective are different to that from a legal perspective, and they're more stringent, actually, and it goes to both control in terms of shareholding but also control in terms of decision making. If Wellington City Council were to control decision making, and that's creeping up there, then we would need to reflect Wellington Water on our financials. We can't afford that in this model. We would not have the capacity, and it would not be recognised from Standard & Poor's to have a consolidated group with the water services entity either. So we really do need to think about this quite carefully as well as part of your decision making.
Councillor Brown.
I would strenuously contest that piece of advice. I mean, at the end of the day, Auckland Council owns 100% of Watercare, and it's, as I understand it, is going to be disconsolidated. I mean, we could always go and ask for an act of parliament, but we're not talking about necessarily control. We're not saying we want control. I realise that there's an influence test as well, but effectively ending up was 1/7 of the vote. And
could we, given that we're going to have time for discussion later.
So I guess my question here is that I recognise the sort of competing aspirations here with respect to partnership versus the person who, or the entity that's contributing most of the revenue and assets, wanting a commensurate amount of the say versus the guy who gets 5% of the assets and the revenue. But would it not be possible to achieve some sort of separation? So in other words, you don't say all of it's 6 out of 7 required versus, or you don't say all of it requires 51% of the shareholders to vote. You could actually have a list of issues that were shareholders, by actual number of shares, and issues that were actually on your partnership type basis. I mean, that would strike me as some sort of compromise type model that, and I kind of don't necessarily want legal advice about this because I know legally it's practicable. I'm talking about more political advice about the AOG. I mean, that's because we voted to have a proportionate say, and now you've come up here and has slapped us right in the face by saying tough luck.
To moderate the language a little,
okay,
Councillor.
sorry. Yeah. But you see my point. So what I want to know is, how far can we push back on this politically to actually get some things?
I think this may be more of a conversation for later, but you've asked a question in there somewhere. Yeah.
Can I attempt an initial answer? So going back to one of our key principles is a partnership approach with mana whenua and giving them an equal voice around the table. So what we've tried to do, or what we're recommending, is that where there are matters which financially, by law, only the financial shareholders can make decisions on, those would be reserved for the financial shareholders because legally that's what you have to do. And where necessary, voting happens on a shareholding proportion, so along the lines of what you're suggesting, Councillor Brown. Following the principle through of participation and partnership, we've therefore recommended that everything else would be decided on a partnership basis by the 7 partners on an equal footing. Now, some of the matters which are recommended as reserved matters for the partners could be reserved for the shareholders only. The question that we'd need to work through is, in that model, what voting rights do you ascribe to your mana whenua partners?
And I think, Dougal, councillors may be articulating that they have a different view of our partnership with mana whenua than they do our partnership with the other city councils of the region, and that there is very good reason for that difference. We'll go back to questions. Councillor Pannett?
Thank you. And actually on that, the mana whenua question. So if we're going to honour Te Tiriti, does that mean that if mana whenua do have strong objections, say to, like we're going to dam something and it doesn't come with favour, will they be able to override it? Or can we have a structure where that might actually be possible?
So again, I think that goes to the position, the accountabilities within the structure. What we're recommending is that councils and mana whenua partners provide the governance oversight and set direction through the statement of expectations. The accountability for how that is responded to is a responsibility of Metro Water, which it would set out through the water services strategy.
Okay, I'll leave that for discussion. Just the other point I've got now is for the appointment of members. I have deep, bitter experience on this, and so I'm just a bit worried that you're essentially saying we're not going to have a veto right. I think we should act in good faith and act in consensus, but if we do have concerns about appointments, I think people should be able to veto and just say no. So could you provide a response to that?
Sorry, can you clarify members of...
Is this in PX?
No.
No. Okay. Sorry. I'll step carefully. If we have a concern about someone, are we going to be able to veto them?
I think you need to talk about the roles that you're talking about veto of.
The directors. The directors.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. The directors.
So the process that we're proposing under this model is that the partners get to set a skills matrix and then would appoint or remove directors in relation to that skills matrix. Again, the decision-making under this model sets out a way of making decisions based on that unanimous decision where possible.
That's what we've got now. We've got a skills matrix and it hasn't always worked. So I'm asking for stronger controls to make sure that doesn't happen. And a veto is a very powerful tool.
Look, we haven't provided for an individual council to veto. There is scope, obviously, of two members of two participants in the partners committee object, then that could actually be achieved. But no, as it currently stands, we've not sought to design single member, single veto on these sorts of things. Now, that is something that is available for all participants to agree.
Sorry, could it be moved by an amendment?
Oh, look, nothing's been adopted yet.
Yeah, so if when we get the paper, are we able to say that could be looked at?
Absolutely. You are absolutely entitled to raise an amendment to ask us to explore different options or just different, yes.
Rogers.
Yeah, it was just because you were inviting suggestions of how to split out the voting proportionality. I guess my suggestion would be if we had already accepted that the voting rights of mana whenua would be 1 in 7, you would continue to give them 1 in 7, and then you would pro-rata the remaining shares by the net book value minus any debt.
That's not something we're thinking about using to allocate votes at the partner committee level. Certainly if it's a shareholder reserve matter, then yes, that is how it would play out. So you would have, according to that table, roughly...
Oh, it was just because you said that you were thinking about ideas for how, yeah.
Okay, sure.
So, Councillor, thank you. So what I'm hearing is that what has been proposed so far in the briefing, and there's more to come, there are different views and how you would like us to think about that. So we've definitely heard those views, so we will take that into consideration. Just remembering that what we are proposing are drafts, and that each of the other 5 councils and mana whenua have these same documents in the same proposal, so they too may have a different view, and so we still need to work through a process to get to a consensus, but just want to assure you I have heard what you've said today.
Councillor Randall.
Yeah, sort of following up from that, we've had briefings before this thing went through, and the observation I recall making the same comments myself, including and hearing it from other elected members, that Wellington City is 50% of the population. By the way, your population chart's wrong because regional councils, you've allocated them 15% of population and they have no population. So even though it says Wellington City Council's got 42% of the share, that's a fiction. We're 50% of the actual population, okay, just to be clear, and the actual number of consumers, we're 50%. We outlined the concern of not repeating Wellington Water and outlined our wish, I thought, to have the large share that we are part of the new entity reflected in the governance model before. So what happened to those wishes, and has the are the other councils, has it ever been put to the other councils the wishes of this set of elected members that we wish a share allocation to reflect the large customer base that will be in the new entity, or is that yet to happen?
Councillor, the other councils are well aware of the expectations, and I use that word intentionally. The other councils are well aware of the expectations that you passed in our May committee meeting. So yes, that is visible. In terms of the expectation at that time, the direction, what we were asked to do is to provide advice on a proportional voting model. And that is what we're presenting here today.
Okay. Insofar as this, when there's conflict, you want 75%. It's my observation under your voting model that the two iwi reps have a blocking vote, but the City Council, Wellington Council, as being half of the entire new entity in terms of consumers, and pretty well the same of revenue and capital, cannot block a vote. So I'm just pointing out. Can you comment?
I think we're getting into the debate again for the.
Well, I know. I wanted to make sure that I just want to understand.
Okay.
Has that been thought through from that perspective in terms of the model that you're offering?
I just think it's important to reiterate what Dougal has expressed, that the principle with which this proposal and the remaining proposals have been developed is on that partnership approach. So that is the underlying thought process that we have used in the development of this advice. As always, with any advice that is shared with you, you are absolutely welcome to require us to consider an alternate. We're also very happy to take feedback, as is what's coming through today, for us to reconsider. We haven't put to you yet a definitive recommendation. So today is a briefing with a starting point. What may come through in the advice from officers remains unchanged, but it may also take on board some of the feedback that's coming through today. And that's the opportunity that we have between now and the papers being available next week, is to make sure that the advice that we put to you that we are comfortable with and it aligns to the principles that we're developing. Our CFO.
Can I also just reinforce my comment? If it is 50% or more, then that creates a very, very different group structure. What Councillor Brown disagreed with me and referred to Watercare, but Watercare is legislated in a very different way that gives them the opportunities to do that, and that is not available to us. So if you are looking at 50%, there are some really significant implications for this model. You would not be able to borrow, like Watercare cannot borrow from LGFA, so they cannot access the cheap level of debt that LGFA provides. This is what the modelling is predicated against. There are some really big fish hooks. So if there was any control over 50% or on 50%, because that's what local government legislation looks at, then this is not the model. This model wouldn't work.
I hear what you're saying, but there's a big difference, a huge difference between 15%, which is what 1/7 is about, and 50%. And so somewhere in the middle, we actually haven't got any advice on that. We don't know how far we can go before this kicks in. Again, that's probably something we need to know. However, one last question. In terms of the key document, you said there's 4 key documents, but probably one of the most important is the statement of intent. And so what I ask is, under which partnership model? Is it the 7 equal partners or the shareholder model? Is the statement of intent approved?
So, Councillor, the statement of expectations, that is issued, so it's issued by the partner committee. And that's the partner committee, which is the 7 parties. As we have said several times, and we alluded to this morning as well, the statement of expectations is a single document that's issued to Metro Water. Where at all possible, it is a joint document that represents the region. The legislation does provide for Wellington Council to include specifics for what Wellington Council is seeking for its ratepayers and residents. So whilst the statement of expectations is issued as a single document from the partner committee as a collective, it does provide for specifics for our community.
Yeah, but to be clear, it's not voted on a shareholder basis. It's voted on a equal.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Winera.
Sorry. Yes, and I promise this is a question. I just want to be careful about leading this discussion in a direction wherein it's implied that appropriate mana whenua representation is or would be somehow a barrier to appropriate proportional representation for this council. Because it sounded to me a little bit like that was where it was going, and I want to just say that, you know, as you yourself did distinguish, there are decisions which are made by financial shareholders and also decisions which are made by everybody. So the question is, surely there is a way in the financial shareholder part of things to ensure we have some measure of appropriate proportionality in voting, you know, leading up to that threshold without crossing it. And then when we return to the committees, well, a committee of the whole, I was about to say, to everybody, the decisions we... In your own time, gents. The committees where everyone is present, then surely that would be the place wherein mana whenua can be appropriately represented.
So I think there's 2 ways of potentially addressing this issue and hearing this feedback. The first would be we've recommended that there's 2 levels of decision making which in part reflect legal requirements and reflect partnership. Some of the matters which we've recommended are made on a partnership basis, 1 party, 1 voice, could be made on a proportional voting basis by the financial shareholders. So some of the recommended matters, reserved matters for the partner committee, for example, could be made on a proportional basis by the shareholders. For example, if the partners or if the shareholders determine that you'd rather make a decision on the statement of expectations based on a proportional basis of shareholding, then that could be considered a reserved matters for the shareholders only. We'd need to find a balance of how you ensured appropriate voice for mana whenua as part of those decisions. So that's the balance to try and strike there. So if there's particular matters listed on particularly the slide here of recommended partner reserve matters that you think perhaps should only be made on the basis of shareholding, that would be a useful starting point for feedback that we could take into account.
Councillor Chung.
I'd go back to what Andrea said before about the difference between accounting and financial shares. And I'm getting a little bit confused here about what the difference is. And it's my understanding that if we have a 50% shareholding, that affects our borrowing ability from LGFA. So how does that happen? Why is that?
So just to clarify, my point wasn't around financial and accounting. My point is that if you have control over a separate legal entity, you need to account for it. And you account for that in your group financial statements. On that basis, our banks, our credit rating agencies, people will look at the full picture of our financial position as a group and what could be, I guess, defaulted and land on us as an individual council, okay? So what we're looking at is that mechanism of control. And so Auckland is in a very different position with Watercare because they have got legislation that protects them in this area, that keeps them as legally separate entities. This is not the same situation, so we need to just be careful we don't compare ourselves with Watercare. But what we need to be able to do is ensure that we can set up this water services entity with the ability to borrow the appropriate amount to do the work that they're going to do. That's the intent of having these water services entities, and the intent behind the legislation to separate them from councils. If we're going to combine them, then that intent is not going to actually come into any fruition because we'll be constricted on how much they can borrow, because ultimately we're the guarantors of that debt. All of the debt, I'm just looking at Sarah in the background actually, all of the debt for all of the councils as well, right? Not just the Wellington City Council component, all of the council's debt. Thanks, Sarah.
Okay, so if we have the partnership model, which we have here, and every partner gets one vote, and your premise is that to come to any agreements on anything, we want to work together and all agree on any particular aspect that we're discussing. It seems to me that again is very, very optimistic, but I'd like to say that perhaps naive, because each of these partners have different objectives and different priorities for their own area. And so if one partner feels that any joint decision that we actually look at impacts on them, that is, maybe we're taking more funds or we're doing something that doesn't benefit them, then it's unlikely that they would agree with it. So
we need to come to a question, councillor.
So I think that this whole model seems flawed based on
Still
premises.
not a question, councillor.
Okay, so the question is that can we actually go back and think of another way of doing this, because I don't think...
Not a question. All right. Councillor Brown.
Cut me off quickly if you're going to cover this, but I don't understand why the statement of expectations is separate from the customer charter. I mean, surely these are all actually the same thing, kind of us setting up some expectations?
Yeah, so councillor, the statement of expectations is legally required. So under the incoming legislation, the charter is something that our council, Porirua at least, other councils have required. So it's not a legally binding document to the same degree as the statement of expectations. What we're proposing is that we do tie them together so that the charter is as important as the statement of expectations.
Councillor Free.
I'm sorry. Can I ask if I'm looking at the share allocation voting and reserved matters 2 out of 2, and there's something I don't really understand. So it says further, if a decision relating to a partner reserved matter requires ratification by a shareholder vote, the shareholders are committed to voting in favour. What does that mean? It's page 12.
Yes, look, what I had in mind there is that under the Companies Act, a director is appointed by way of an ordinary resolution of shareholders formally. And so if we need, the view is taken that shareholders need to actually ratify or endorse the decision to appoint an individual as a director that's been made by the Partners Committee, then the shareholders will actually follow through with the...
What's the point of them even being involved in the process if they've got to agree? I mean, you know, really, it's a bit like the process we're in right now. I'm so massively uncomfortable with all of this, massively, because we're meant to be representing a big proportion of this deal, and we have such little power and such huge consequences in the pre-election period where some of us are not even going to be here. This is so deeply, deeply inappropriate that I can't believe we're in it. I'm sorry.
I think this is a comment for later. We're in questions, and we're going to have an opportunity to. Okay, you've made your point, Councillor Pannett.
Just following up from Councillor Free, this was precisely the number of our issues. So if the someone makes an appointment, does the company, the directors then are able to exercise discretion and challenge that process?
You say the directors
Yeah.
challenging the appointment of another director by
Yeah,
the...
so what Sarah was reading out, if someone comes with a recommendation, under the Companies Act, will people be able to exercise full discretion?
No, the commitment we're proposing is that if you all in conclave have agreed that a particular individual should be appointed as a director, then you will vote in favour of that if it is necessary to have a formal shareholders' resolution to achieve that.
Right, okay, so in other words, if you have a pre-discussion.
Yes.
I should add that has been kind of referenced as an example, but this would apply to all partner reserve matters.
Yes, if they'd required a shareholder endorsement. A lot of them don't.
Me, councillor? Yes.
So what is the point of going through a different, like you've got two layers of decision making, it would seem, or that's the proposal. You approve it through one layer and then you say, oh, it's going to go to the other layer, but they have to agree. So what's the point?
I think it's only Dougal mentioned this was an example. It's probably the only example that we've thought of, otherwise we'd have mentioned it.
But it doesn't say it's the only example. It says if any decision, basically a decision, related to a partner preserved matter requires ratification by a shareholder vote. It's not saying... It's not just saying it's an example. It's using a general, stating a general principle.
Councillor, we can, if, depending on feedback and how the rest of the session goes, when we take all the feedback into consideration, we can look to tighten that up. Yeah, taking on board. Yeah.
Thank you, Margot. Deputy Mayor Foon.
Yeah, just looking at these shareholding and reserve matters, and I can't recall if we've discussed this or not, but does this Metro Water, through these agreements, have the capability to amalgamate, for example, other councils into this contract? Could it be the one entity over Aotearoa in the end? Like, does it have the capability to do that?
One water company to rule them all?
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is hard enough, isn't it?
Yeah.
So
Councillor, we have... Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So yes, in the governance arrangements we're proposing, so it definitely includes the possibility of a council joining, a council exiting. So all of those provisions have been accommodated.
And we have actually thought, but it's probably at a level of detail that has not probably come through on the slides, the possibility of one or more councils amalgamating in the fullness of time. I think if we got to a situation where one council had left, Greater Wellington, and all four councils had amalgamated, we would actually need to reset the documents at that point.
Councillor Free.
Does this mean we're not captive and we actually could decide to go? Yes. As Wellington City Council, we
yes,
could. How would we exit out of this if it doesn't work?
So,
and what like, can we actually vote to leave, or are we captive in here?
So no, any council, once we have established Metro Water, legally any council could exit under the exit provisions that have been built in, absolutely.
And you've only got one vote.
I was just about to say that. Thank you, Councillor. Yeah.
You've got to do something about that. If a council actually has no genuine power to leave because of the 75% and the one vote thing, that has to be fixed.
So I'll take that feedback. I'm just in interest of time. I'll take that feedback on board. But what I will say to Chris's point, what we're presenting here in these slides is a very, very rolled up view of what is actually in the technical documents which you have. So what we also need to take on board is how to make sure that these particulars are communicated to you succinctly. And I think that might be part of, understanding and recognising that this is the first time you've seen this, so we may need to have a second session where we're a little bit more fine-tuned on the messaging.
Is there more presentation? Is there more slides? Let's carry on. Let's truck on.
We knew that wouldn't be the easy bit. No, that's why we front-footed this issue, because we knew that the share allocation and the method of making decisions either as shareholders or as partners was going to be really important, so we front-footed that. So in the documents, and there's a range of documents before you, we've got the draft terms for the Constitution, the Partners Agreement and the Statement of Expectations, as well as the Consumer Charter. What we've tried to do with these two slides and also with this document is really pull out what are the other key terms that the partners will need to settle on. So, as mentioned, as far as possible, we're trying to get agreement between the partners about the terms of working together ahead of elections, so that incoming directors have got clarity, we can all move forward, we're all in the same waka, and the terms can be finalised and ratified post-election. So there's an ongoing journey here. So in addition to the shareholding structure and the basis for allocating shares, other key terms that we just wanted to talk through today up on the screen or on the following slide. So the second one is around mana whenua participation, and the key proposal there is that we're using one set of documents, a partners basis. We're not issuing a separate document for the shareholders and a separate document of how we're going to work with mana whenua. It's a single set of documents working together, and that mana whenua have meaningful participation, including as a decision maker, is the recommendation. So obviously feedback on that today. We've talked a bit about the list of reserve matters, the reserve matters both for shareholders, the financial shareholders, and the list of reserve matters for partners. Now again, perhaps that's an area where we can refine and changing some of those matters if you deem that perhaps these are matters that only shareholders should make decisions on, as opposed to making decisions in partnership. That list could be refined as well. The Partners Committee, we're recommending that you need a vehicle for agreeing together decisions, and we're recommending that there is a Partners Committee of representatives from each of the 7 partners, where those members have full delegated authority to make decisions on behalf of your respective partners in relation to those reserve matters. That would include the board appointment, approval or removal process, so that the partner committee or a subcommittee thereof appoints or removes directors in accordance with the agreed skills matrix. I'll just follow through the slide if I can, and then perhaps take questions on this. Adding and exiting partners, we definitely need some clarity around how a council could leave the partnership, particularly for Greater Wellington, given this is a potential, or a new council could join. And in particular, the shareholding councils, the partners need to have the ability to set a price for joining. So there is a possibility orphan councils out there in the future will say, we'd really like to join Metro Water. You need to have the ability to set the terms for that entry, recognising that you as councils have invested significantly in this process and in the establishment of Metro Water. The level of operational involvement, so what we're recommending here, the bill leaves some options open. We're recommending that partners can provide comment on the draft water services strategy and annual budget, but to ensure there's that clarity of accountability, Metro Water sets that strategy and draft budget and must take into account the comments from councils and partners, but is not legally required to do so. And again, that's just that clarity of accountability between who's got the customer relationship, who has the risk, who has the investment plan, as opposed to the direction and outcome sought by the partners through the Statement of Expectations. Similarly, the level of operational oversight, we're recommending that's in line with the provisions of the bill. There's a prohibition on distributions to the shareholding councils and dividends, and that the Metro Water is required to retain a customer charter. We think these are the key provisions that we've really tried to elevate and give some light to, and really interested in your feedback on these points today, and this will really help inform the next version of the documents going forward. But again, I'll pause there on Patai.
Councillor Pannett.
Sorry, just going back to the first one, in light of my comments before, so you're saying a subcommittee might be able to appoint, is that, have I understood that correctly?
We haven't determined that that could be an option.
Okay, so
I'm strongly use of subcommittee.
I'm strongly opposed.
Noted.
Yeah, okay. And then the other point I think you'd said earlier, Margot, that the government was looking at giving councils a bit of power in the setting of strategy or something. It's on the second page. So is that prohibited in terms of the water services strategy and annual budget? They don't, we can comment, but yeah, is there any way that we could have a bit more power in that space? Because that's where we're deeply concerned, obviously, yeah.
So yes, the legislation does provide options. And so of the options that are allowed under the legislation, our proposal is that the draft strategy is provided to the partners for comment only, so that we keep, as Dougal has just outlined, we keep that separation of accountability, we keep the separation around the risk, given that it's Metro Water that has the risk. They have the funding and investment relationships and investment responsibilities. So making sure that councils as the partner committee very much stay in that governor role, because we run the risk if the partners start to want to provide feedback and approve the strategy, then we start to step into the territory of who is actually running the organisation, who has the responsibility for delivering the water services. And so staying in that governance role by receiving the strategy for comment only helps keeps all parties safe.
So if there was another Havelock North disaster, how would the councils and mana whenua exercise accountability over Metro Water or any other thing going wrong?
Well, we certainly hope there's never another Havelock North, and that's the genesis of water reforms over the last 20 years, obviously. So I think it does go though to what we're recommending here around the role of the partners, of providing direction which Metro Water has to give effect to through the statement of expectation, and then there is clarity of accountability of how you respond to that, so that there is that clear distinction of, as a board, you are accountable for setting the investment and the delivery of that through the water services strategy and managing the organisation to deliver upon that. That helps to ensure that there is that clarity of liability, that ensure that clarity of responsibility for that as well. Again, it's one of the challenges that we have with Wellington Water model at the moment, and to me as a fundamental challenge is you have a board who are being held to account for an organisation where they have no control in reality over the annual budget that they actually have and the ability to respond to risks, because that budget is held by and controlled by councils. So this is where we're trying to
The board is accountable then, ultimately. Yeah, okay, thanks.
Councillor Brown.
Thanks. So I'm just trying to work out more sort of going ahead rather than necessarily the sort of transitional thing. So the committee, the partnership, or whatever you call it, agrees on its statement of expectations, and that requires 6 out of 7. So we've got our 6 out of 7 to agree to something or other. That then goes to the company, and the company is obliged to produce its plan. But if the plan is, for whatever reason, inconsistent with the expectations, there's absolutely nothing which the partnership committee can do. And if it subsequently doesn't deliver on even the plan which it has put forward, again, there's nothing the partners can actually do except change the directors. Is that right? So they've got one sanction.
That's quite a curly one, Councillor Brown. So the way that the draft legislation, Bill 3, is written, it says that the organisation must give effect to the statement of expectations. What we're not sure about, and given that there's amendments being worked through at the moment on that bill, is where that's going to land and what any recourse the Partners Committee in this instance would have if the water strategy didn't talk to those expectations. So, but what we will do is we will look at where the bill is at with the various amendments that have come through and the report back, etc., and I'll come back to you with a written response.
And I guess just to sort of follow on from that is that when I look at electricity lines companies as an example, or the airport, they produce a 5-year investment and pricing plan, which at the airport it goes through the airlines first, but then it goes to, in both cases, it goes to the Commerce Commission for effectively ratification. In this case, is there going to be any actual legal obligation, whether through the law or through the statement of expectation, for the water company to produce its 5-year plan?
So the water services strategy that they are required to produce actually requires a 10-year horizon. And it's quite prescriptive what it must include. Obviously, the partner committee could require it to include further information, but the legislation is quite prescriptive as to what must be included in there, to the level of pricing and investment and charging regime and the reasoning for that. But as I say, it's a 10-year horizon as opposed to 5.
And if the committee, if 6 out of 7 of the committee said we don't like 13.1% per annum for the next 10 years, would the company be obliged to then actually follow that advice, or could it say, that's nice that you don't like it, but tough luck, we're going to do it anyhow?
Well, it does depend on what is established in the Constitution, which is where you would establish what is the role of the partner committee in relation to that strategy.
Gotcha.
My recommendation would be is that rather than rely on receiving a strategy and then reacting, is that the partners think about any cap or any limitations and they set that through the statement of expectations. Because as I'm sure you would appreciate, to develop up a 10-year strategy would be no light feat. So to get to the point where the organisation has prepared that strategy, put a lot of effort into it, it comes back and then is rejected essentially, it doesn't help anyone, because there's also the point that there must be a current water services strategy in place at all times. So any toing and froing on that strategy puts Metro Water in a very difficult position. So I think it would be far more prudent for the partners to set any kind of expectation up front.
And is the company going to be obliged to redo its strategy like 3 yearly? Or?
Yes.
Right.
Yes, it's essentially the long-term plan of water.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Councillor Randall.
Sorry, if I can just layer one more. So again, with relation to the water services strategy, it is going to be a really important document in terms of the accountability and governance of the new water organisation. We envisage that will require public consultation. We envisage that will require engagement with the Commerce Commission. We're still working through the process and exactly what's required for that, because as Mo says, Bill 3 is still landing. But it is a really critical document, and it needs to be a document which builds the trust and confidence not only of the partners, but also the consumers, the customers that are going to get delivery as well. And through that, water organisation really needs to build the trust and confidence and maintain social licence. So it can't just develop a document in isolation and expect that it can be delivered. It really is a critical document for maintaining ongoing trust in relationship with the partners and with customers going forward.
That's sort of true, although Wellington Water managed to plough on for years without necessarily that trust and confidence. In terms of the ability to add and leave, how is it clear that a council can leave the new water entity unilaterally, and how long would that take? Under, how many steps are there in that sort of exit process?
Yeah, the intention is that if a council wants to leave, and that's for its decision to make. We think it's actually quite difficult in the abstract to specify, each and every step that needs to be taken. I think the best we can do is put principles in for the time being. I mean, if we knew that people were going to leave within a 2 or 3 year horizon, then that would be possible. But this could be 10, 20, 30 years down the track. So I think it will be thematic and principle driven as to, how an exit would look.
Okay, and just in terms of exploring the proportionality and control, if you like, that Andrea Reeves raised, can we get some advice as to what that shareholding level is? In other words, what level of proportionality if we go down the proportionality route, can the city council get to without the concern that's raised by the CFO kicking in, so that we know, is it 50? Can we go to 49.9%, or because there was talk about Standard & Poor's as well, and that sort of stuff. And so I just wanted to know, the advice about saying, if we wanted to go down the, ask and explore the proportional vote share, which we do have on some decisions, do we need to know where that bright line is?
50%.
So it's 50%.
It would depend. Sorry, we can't be that categoric. It would be less than 50%, but equally you would have to make quite detailed assessments around control, which is about influence and benefit, and that is quite a separate test. So it's likely to be lower, and it would need to be lower in that case.
I think we've sort of indicated...
I can't give advice on the fly
Yeah, we've
either.
indicated a desire for advice around this.
Yeah, no, because I'm also concerned that should Greater Wellington leave, that the proportionality may kick over. And again, we need to know that that could be a consequence, that Greater Wellington could leave and all of a sudden we find ourselves liable. So we need to just, unpack that risk. Well, if Greater Wellington leaves, then our percentage of the remaining amount will get to be larger, and if it exceeds 50%, the issue of us having effective control through being a shareholder and the shareholder decisions will become real, and it could actually change the financial status of the entity. I just want advice. I'm not saying it's going to happen.
I think the desire for advice has been expressed. I mean, I think we have to be careful about going down every rabbit hole of potential hypotheticals.
It has been mentioned that Greater Wellington leaving.
All right, I've got you next on the list, Councillor Free, have I?
Yeah, I did put my hand up.
Shall we move on with the presentation? Is there more presentation? Just a little smidge of presentation, thank you.
Just one. So we've undertaken similar briefing sessions so far with Upper Hutt, Porirua and Greater Wellington. I'm off to Hutt City very shortly. We've also met with Mana Whenua in relation to these key terms. We'll be bringing, as me whānau mentions, a summary of the discussion to the AOG on Friday to highlight where we seem to have alignment and perhaps where there are areas where further work or consideration is required. The AOG, as you know, has got delegations to work together to try and draft the final documents, but what we're hoping to do is to bring back to you for your decision papers in 20th August a set of documents that you're able to endorse as a working basis for moving forward with your partners to try and resolve and finalise. Our goal is to try and, as far as possible, find a common ground on the terms of how you intend to establish a new organisation, so that that's clear and we can continue to progress the establishment of Metro Water, including appointing directors and setting up the company, with the final terms and documents being finalised in the new triennium going forward. So, as I say, several opportunities for elected members to input into this process going forward, but your feedback today has been very valuable as well. But thank you.
All right, Councillor Randall?
No, yeah.
In terms of the documents being presented to us, if the council decides that it cannot accept them, is there time to revisit and refine them before the deadline of the Water Services Plan needing to be submitted? Or is it really a situation that we have to approve it?
Yeah. So, Councillor, yes, there is. They're not dependent on each other. Sorry, the Water Services Plan being submitted to DIA is not dependent on these decisions. These decisions we're progressing in parallel at this time so that we can progress with the establishment of Metro Water and incorporating it, and then start commencing recruitment for the CE. So that they're not tied together.
Okay, so if the papers presented aren't passed as presented or recommended, given that they're also probably subject to agreement through the partners, what sort of time frame or impact would have should they not be accepted and more negotiations will be needed?
So the intent to present to you in August would be a set of draft papers, and they are draft intentionally, as Dougal just referred to. So they're draft in the sense of being working documents. So then the next step would be for the AOG to take those agreed drafts from each of the councils and mana whenua and work together to resolve any remaining discrepancies. So it might be that for the bulk of it, there's consensus, and there might be one particular area where there needs discussion, and that's what you have tasked your AOG representatives to progress, ideally, before the end of this triennium.
Councillor Free?
So I was going to ask, what genuine influence do we have? No, I'm serious. I'm actually serious, because I feel like this is a forced marriage, and it's not actually comfortable. I mean, what has been done to put Wellington City's point of view about representation, because I've been on the Transport Committee, the Regional Transport Committee, trying to represent very diverse interests of a whole transport community in Wellington. Three Wairarapa votes outvoted me every time.
Councillor, I think the first part of the question, if someone wants to answer, but in terms of what
our experiences have been,
what's been put, how our priorities have been put, I think that is a discussion for us to have as a council in the subsequent session.
What genuine influence can we have, and how can we affect that influence right now?
So right now, each council and mana whenua have the same starting position, which is what we've presented to you today, and it is a starting point. And so therefore it's up to each council to have conversations, consider what works, what doesn't work, perhaps where possible provide feedback on what some options are for us to consider as a central project team. And then that is up to the AOG to then look at those side by side, because there will undoubtedly be contradictions. Someone wants more of that and someone wants less of that to feature in the constitution or the partner agreement. We need to work that through, and as I say, that's what the AOG have been tasked to do, and your AOG representatives need to keep you close to those conversations so that you know how those are progressing.
Well, at the moment, it doesn't seem very reassuring, to be quite honest.
I think, as I say, I think that's why we have the subsequent time. Are there more questions? Councillor Pannett, I did think I saw your hand.
No, sorry. Sorry, the statement of expectation, when can we get more information on that?
What kind of information?
I want to know.
Just let me help.
Sorry, usually I'm not a detailed person, but this time, exactly what we can stipulate that the board will have to do.
So what we've provided to you are principles to then shape the thinking. So you have that already. I can share with you what the legislation enables us or anyone to include in a statement of expectations, if that would help. But there is nothing beyond that to say already we've thought about these 10 things that we would stipulate to Metro Water, because we don't want to preempt the conversations that we're having with you and that the other councils are also having. So we haven't done that, and that's intentional. Okay.
Councillor Brown, and then I think that's the end of that part of the session. Thank you.
When you presented this to Pororo City Council, did they stare at you with open-mouthed amazement that they were going to have the same voting rights as Wellington City Council, even though they were contributing a mere 10% of the assets and revenue? Don't need to answer that. The Regional Water Committee, I mean, I get the appointment thing. Oh, no, actually, it's okay. No, I've sort of answered it.
All right, okay. Thank you, team. We are now going to take a 5-minute break. Deep breath. We're going to turn the camera off.